This is a read aloud for the short read, The First Town Meeting, an excerpt from The People of Sparks by Jeannie Day Prow. Now remember to annotate as you read. We'll do more annotating and videos on that, but the key word here is excerpt, and this is just, if you zoom out, part of a story of an entire story. And if you come over here, it's really important to know what type of reading this is, and it's science fiction. Okay, fiction means not true, so it's a fun little story. And if you pop out, you can see that the paragraphs are shorter. Definitely a different style of reading than the previous one, which was solving problems. And if you flip over one more page, you can see that there are exactly 15 paragraphs. So let's begin. Again, down the road, there'll be other videos explaining how to analyze the text a little better, but right now this is just a short read. The first meeting, an excerpt from The People of Sparks. Here we go. The People of Sparks is in the second title in the books of Ember science fiction series. The book is set in a not so distant future in which war has devastated Earth. It tells the story of a group of people who have emerged tired and hungry from an underground city. They have left their city because they can no longer produce electricity there. They find the settlement of Sparks where they are welcomed and fed, but the town's resources are limited. How long will the townspeople let the newcomers stay? In this excerpt from part 1 of the book, a town meeting is held to decide their fate. Now notice how I was following along with a pen. Please have your child follow with a pen or pencil as they do a read loud. Now I'm holding the camera and videoing this at the same time, so sorry if it's not perfect. Here we go, paragraph number 1. While Lena slept, the 3 town leaders were holding a meeting. They sat at a table in the tower room of the town hall, which looked out over the plaza. Mary's hands were clasped tightly in front of her. Ben scowled, his gray eyebrows bunched together, deepening the 2 lines between them. Wilmer pulled nervously on one ear and looked from Mary to Ben and back to Mary. Moving on to paragraph number 2. You have a quote. Quote, "They can't stay here," said Mary. "There are too many of them. Where would we put them? How would we feed them?" Paragraph 3. "Yes," said Wilmer, "but where can they go?" Paragraph 4. No one spoke. They had no answer for that question. Outside the settlement of Sparks, the empty land stretched for miles in all directions. Second page. Paragraph 5. "They could go up to Pine Gap," said Wilmer. "Maybe." Mary snorted and shook her head. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "That's at least 2 weeks' walk away. How could these feeble people travel that far? How could they carry enough food with them? Where would they get enough food? Unless we emptied our storehouse and gave them everything." Paragraph 7. Wilmer nodded, knowing she was right. The people of Sparks knew of only 3 other settlements, and they'd heard from the roamers that those places were smaller and poorer than Sparks. Their inhabitants wouldn't want extra mouths to feed either. Paragraph 8. The 3 of them gazed out the window and sat down at the moonlight plaza, filled with strange sleeping people from a city under the earth. 400 of them with no food, no possessions to speak of, and nowhere to go. Check out the picture. Zoom it out. 2 more pages. Paragraph 9, which you can see, the longest paragraph. Paragraph 9. What I fail to understand, said Ben, is why this particular misfortune has happened to us. He paused, looked into the air to his left, and frowned. This was a habit of his. He seemed to need a pause and a frown every now and then to put together his thoughts. Wilmer and Mary had gotten used to waiting through these pauses. I don't see that we deserve it, Ben went on after a few seconds. Having labored as diligently as we have, and just when we are starting to prosper at last, after so many years of, well, adversity is a mild word for it. Paragraph 10. The others nodded, thinking of the hard years. There had been winters when people shivered in tents and ate chopped up roots and shriveled nuts. There had been years of drought and plagues, of tomato worms and devastating crop failures. That meant people had nothing to eat for months but cabbage and potatoes. There had been times when people had to work so hard to stay alive that they sometimes died just from being too tired to go on. No one wanted to go back to those times. Paragraph 11. So what do we do? Said Mary. If they can't stay and they can't go, what is the right thing to do? The others sat silent. Well, there's the Pioneer, said Wilmer, as a temporary solution. True, said Ben. Paragraph 15, and you can see the picture right there. Last paragraph. A good thought, said Mary and Wilmer beamed. So what about this, Mary went on. We'll let them stay in the Pioneer. We'll give them water and food. We do have some extra in the storehouse. In exchange, they work. They help in the fields. They help with building. They do whatever there is to do. We'd have to teach them how. As far as I can see, they know nothing. After a while, when they're stronger and when they know better how to get along, they can move on. They can set up their own village somewhere else. And that is the end of the short read. Remember, it's a science fiction read, and it's just part of a story, and the reason why it's called an excerpt. And that is an excerpt from that first town meeting. Remember to reread it several times. That only took about 9 minutes. If you cut out the first minute and the last 30 seconds, it's about an 8-minute read. You can read this as many times as you want and go back to different paragraphs, pause, practice on the words that might be tough or words that you're working on in class, such as feeble, to help you better understand the text. And more importantly, there'll be strategies whenever you do come across a word that you can use words around it in that sentence or other paragraphs, also known as context clues, to figure out what the word means. But that's for another time and place. Goodbye.